Services Commissioner Jerry Hauer, and New York State Respond Commission Co-Chair Brad Penuel.
Well, good morning, everybody. On behalf of Governor Cuomo, I want to extend our appreciation for all of you joining us today at the Governor's Conference on Emergency Preparedness. It's a great crowd. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by members of the New York State Legislature, county executives and chairs, local elected officials, law enforcement officials, and hundreds of first responders and emergency managers from throughout New York State, whose goals are saving lives, protecting property and the environment during emergencies and disasters. In just a moment, you'll hear from Commissioner Jerry Hauer, Brad Penuel, and finally Governor Cuomo himself. This conference is a culmination of months of preparation by Commissioner Hauer and his team at the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, and it promises to be a very exciting and extremely informative day for all of us. I'm proud to say this administration has made emergency preparedness its top priority in New York State, and we have a very, very diverse risk portfolio here in New York. We've learned from the events of September 11th, Hurricane Irene, Tropical Storm Lee, Hurricane Sandy, flooding in the Mohawk Valley in western New York this past summer, that we need to anticipate and be prepared for all types of disasters. And we have made, in many ways, very great strides towards our goal of making New York the best emergency management system in the world. I'm no stranger to the difficulties that you all face, and I'm proud of each and every one of you for what you've done during these disasters, putting yourself in harm's way to protect the public. And I want to take this time to personally thank all of our first responders and everything that you do in our state, cities, and communities to support prevention, protection, preparedness, and response efforts across New York State. You deserve a big round of applause, and you deserve our honor and our thanks. After today, we look forward to continuing to participate with this great community and our larger network of partners who contribute to Homeland Security. I want to again thank everybody for what you've done to support our state and to keep New York State safe and secure. We're really honored to have you all here today, taking time away from your careers and your responsibilities to be part of this, and certainly you're going to make for a great day. It is my pleasure to introduce somebody who is no stranger. He is a commissioner who's done great work. He's not only a statewide expert, he's a national expert and an international expert in first response in so many different areas that we face this year. Please welcome Jerry Hauer. Jerry.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Duffy. I really appreciate your kind comments. First of all, I'm honored to join all of you here today, especially Brad Penuel and especially Governor Cuomo. Just as a personal note, I wasn't planning on coming back to government and had no intention of coming back to government. But, and I wouldn't have come back to government except to work for this man. He's very persuasive, and he convinced me to do it. But in seriousness, I came back to government because of his commitment, and I'm glad I did. I'm also proud to join the hundreds of you emergency responders, emergency management professionals here today, and all the other attendees, the state police, the National Guard. I personally want to thank Governor Cuomo for his leadership and his commitment to emergency preparedness. We all know well the governor's tireless dedication to making New York State safer, stronger, and more resilient. He has literally been on the front line every time a natural disaster has hit our state. I've seen him out there day and night. No matter what the weather, he's out there in the middle of it. That's his commitment. And then he bends to the task of marshaling all the necessary resources to make us better prepared for the next event. We're here 1 year after we had prepared for a similar conference last year, only to be canceled by an unprecedented event, Superstorm Sandy. But the governor was determined that we come together here to discuss the lessons we have learned from disasters such as Sandy, Irene, Tropical Storm Lee, and the floods that ravaged the Mohawk Valley this past summer. So we appreciate everyone making the trip today. And you'll be getting today an update on the governor's Ready and Response Commissions, followed by the governor and a special presentation he's making to some remarkable individuals and departments. We'll then break for lunch, which will be followed by our afternoon training session. We're happy you're with us today. We have an excellent agenda, and I'm now pleased to introduce Brad Penuel, the co-chair of the New York Response Commission. Brad?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. On behalf of the co-chairs of the New York State Ready and the New York State Respond Commissions, it is an honor to be here today with Governor Cuomo, Lieutenant Governor, Commissioner Hauer, and so many of our state's heroic first responders and emergency management officials. Immediately after Superstorm Sandy, Governor Cuomo made clear that he was committed to New York learning the lessons of the storm so that we would be even more prepared for future weather events, and the governor moved quickly to impanel 2 commissions with more than 60 members between them to focus on both our preparedness and our ability to respond to emergencies, the New York State Ready and New York State Respond Commissions. The Ready and Respond Commissions recognize the incredible response during Superstorm Sandy from Governor Cuomo, from state and local officials, from first responders, and from nonprofit organizations, businesses, and ordinary New Yorkers. We focused on ways to learn from what worked during Sandy and what could be done to prepare for ever more frequent severe weather events in the future, what the governor has referred to as the new normal. A few common themes emerged from our work: the need for quality data and information, the importance of state-of-the-art training and preparation, the key role of coordination across all sectors, both public and private, resilience in the systems New Yorkers rely on, such as fuel and communication systems, and specific strategies to address the needs of the most vulnerable residents. Under Governor Cuomo's leadership, the state has made major progress implementing the Commission's recommendations, and I'm honored to give you a summary of these now. Our first recommendation was to establish a statewide network of unified emergency training, coordination, and communication protocols to ensure that emergency management officials and responders plan and prepare regionally. Recognizing that storms and other emergencies ignore municipal boundaries, Commissioner Hauer has created 10 emergency response zones focused on regional preparedness and coordination, each led by a single qualified leader. Our second recommendation was to expand state-of-the-art training opportunities for emergency management officials and responders. Under the governor's leadership, the state has significantly increased training for state, county, and local officials and first responders, including a 5-fold increase in the number of people trained at Oriskany, the State Preparedness Training Center. Our third recommendation was to establish a statewide emergency stockpile system. Governor Cuomo has now established 9 regional stockpiles with critical equipment and life-saving supplies, including emergency generators, water, and food. Fourth was to build on the National Guard's extraordinary performance during Superstorm Sandy by finding more ways for them to help expedite power restoration and other emergency response functions. The National Guard is now ready to deploy teams of Guard members with just-in-time training to provide critical support and coordination to help utilities rapidly restore power. Next, recognizing the importance of the fuel supply for first responders, workers, and families, The commissions focused on the importance of ensuring a resilient energy system. Our fifth recommendation was to require backup power for strategically located gas stations. Pleased to say that Governor Cuomo has proposed and enacted the nation's strongest gas station backup power law, which will ensure that every downstate gas station near a highway or an evacuation route will have backup power within 24 hours of an emergency. Our sixth recommendation helps ensure that once our gas stations have power, they also have access to fuel in case of a temporary disruption in the supply chain by having a strategic gasoline reserve to serve as a temporary bridge. Responding to this, Governor Cuomo has announced the creation of the nation's first state-level strategic gasoline reserve, which will be located on Long Island and hold more than 3 million gallons to help avoid shortages in an emergency. In addition to energy, a second critical sector during and after an emergency is always communications. During Sandy, Governor Cuomo showed how social media, television, print media, radio, and other forms of communication could be used effectively to reassure and direct the public. Our seventh recommendation was to establish an online one-stop shop for disaster response after Sandy. Stormrecovery.ny.gov achieves this important goal by providing access to assistance programs and real-time information on emergency recovery resources. Our eighth recommendation was to develop a way for the state to deliver location-specific information to New Yorkers using their cell phones. Corresponding to this recommendation, Governor Cuomo has recently received approval from the federal government to do precisely that using the Wireless Emergency Alert System, which will enable the state to inform residents of location-specific directions, local resources like food and shelter, and other critical information in their communities. During Sandy, we saw heroic efforts from everyone from state officials to local first responders to address the life and safety needs of vulnerable New Yorkers, such as those in hospitals, nursing homes, and other healthcare facilities. Governor Cuomo directed the commissions to specifically examine the needs of these populations, and his administration has worked over the last year to ensure the preparedness of vulnerable New Yorkers for future emergencies. Under Governor Cuomo's leadership, the state has created and deployed an innovative patient tracking system known as eFinds, a location tracking system for patients and residents of hospitals, nursing homes, adult care facilities, and other healthcare and human service facilities that are evacuated in an emergency. The Department of Health has assessed hospitals and nursing homes so that decision makers have the necessary information to make real-time decisions about whether they can shelter in place or they will need to evacuate. The state has trained healthcare workers and officials on updated evacuation procedures and plans. And finally, our 10th recommendation was to take location vulnerabilities into account when new healthcare facilities are built so that they are more resilient to future severe weather events. The state has acted and is putting in place new requirements for backup power and weather protection in new hospitals and nursing homes that are built anywhere in the state within the 500-year floodplain. In closing, and on behalf of my colleagues on both the New York State and Respond Commission, thank you, Governor Cuomo, for the honor of participating in this important work. Your leadership on these critical issues has been astounding over the last year, and we thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad, very much. Folks, when you look at the presentation, I would say you've never seen this before in New York State. It is a first, and it gives you an indication of what this man, who I'll introduce next, has done over the last 3 years. I often get accused of being a cheerleader. Well, I cheerlead out of pride for what this man has done for the state and out of support for what I see him do every single day. And I'm proud to be termed that way because I get to see what he does. I spent 28 and a half years in a first responder role in Rochester, in my role as a police officer up through chief. I sense what you go through, and I think every one of us, whether you're a cop, a firefighter, an EMS provider, or first responder, you want to know that the person in charge cares, and the person in charge listens, and the person in charge is willing to take steps to make your job easier and help coordinate things and make your first response as safe and as thorough as possible. Well, folks, we have that person as a governor of the state of New York because over the last 3 years, he has made such a transformative change in public safety and first response that I think, in my mind, it is absolutely unparalleled. We've been hit with so many disasters. Unlike any other state, we've been hit one after the other, but each time, this state has been stronger and better and improves in terms of what it does. Why? Because we have a governor from the very first storm of disaster right through the last one, has been boots on the ground, leading from the front. He's not sitting in his office making decisions. He's out in the floods, he's out in the storms, he's walking through areas, seeing firsthand what has to be done. And then the way he does so well, smash that bureaucracy and get things done. He has made every single one of us proud. He has made this state proud. He has made this state stronger. And what you just saw is just an indicator of where New York State is going, because leadership does matter, and this man has provided outstanding leadership. So please welcome the great governor, the great state of New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Welcome all to Albany. First to Lieutenant Governor Bob Duffy. He is the hardest working and most effective member of my administration. You've seen him all over the state. Nobody works like the Lieutenant Governor. Let's give him a big round of applause, Lieutenant Governor Bob Duffy. Commissioner Jerry Hauer, he's no stranger to the people in this room. It's not an exaggeration to say Jerry is a national, if not international, expert in this area. I worked with him in Washington. I read about him when he was in New York City. And he's right, he was in Washington, and I called him up when I got this job, and I told him he had to come back. Guilt works as a recruitment tool, I've learned that. Threats also work, and since he wanted to come back and visit, he came back to join the team, and he has been extraordinary. I didn't know, frankly, when I called him, how badly I was going to need him, or how frequently we were going to need his talents, but we're lucky to have him, Commissioner Jerry Hauer. To Brad Penuel, thank you for serving on the commission. It did yeoman's work in a very short period of time. Thank you. Brad Penuel, pleasure to be with you. I'd also like to introduce General Murphy, who's here, who runs the National Guard in New York State, which has been fantastic in every emergency we've had. General Murphy, pleasure. Thank you. And at his side has been State Police Superintendent Joseph D'Amico. Let's give him a round of applause. Just let me make a couple of points, if I might, as you start off the day, because I think this is a critically important area. We're going to be celebrating the one-year anniversary of Sandy, Hurricane Sandy, tomorrow, believe it or not. It's a fast year indeed. It's been about 2 years since Irene and Lee. And there's so much to remember and so much to process and so much to learn from. There's plenty to grieve about. We lost life in Sandy. And there's plenty to be grateful for. And top of the grateful list are the first responders who are in this state, who showed a courage and a skill. And if it wasn't for the first responders in this state and what they did, you would have seen more damage, you would have seen more lives lost. And let's give yourselves a round of applause. But we took it very seriously. We've made great progress over the past year in a number of areas. We're redoing our energy supply system, literally. Raising substations on Long Island in the New York City area. We've changed the way we look at creek management and stream management. So much work has to be done because it's too late the day of the storm to figure out that the creeks haven't been properly maintained or the streams haven't been properly maintained. Fuel supply system, fuel shortage. The state didn't have a fuel reserve. It never came up before. But when you close New York Harbor and the barges can't get in for one day, caused a 2-week backup before we actually caught up to the supply. All these situations that nobody had frankly thought of before. How to rebuild housing in a way that it's more resilient, anticipating a storm in the future. So we've been working our way through the list. The 2 commissions did great work very early on, and we've made great progress. But there's certainly a lot more to do. We had a 2-prong approach on the reconstruction. We had a classic top-down effort, federal government to the state government to county governments, where we administer housing programs, economic development programs, infrastructure programs. We've been working with the federal government, working with FEMA. There's always red tape when you deal with the federal government, and not everything has gone as quickly as we would have liked, but at the end of the day with the federal government, we did very well. We requested a supplemental appropriation for the storm damage. $60 billion was appropriated basically for New York and New Jersey. New York will get more than 50% of that. That's over $30 billion, which is a lot of money, even on our balance sheet. That's a lot of money. We then had that appropriation made eligible for Irene and Lee also. So we have $30 billion for the Sandy communities, Irene communities, and Lee communities, which is more discretionary money than the past 5 governors have seen in their lifetime. So that's a really great accomplishment for the state. And then we took a bottom-up approach, which I'm very excited about, what they call New York Rising and community revitalization zones. We had the individual communities in here last week. And we said to the communities, while we're doing all these federal top-down programs, let's get the communities to come up with their own individual vision for how to rebuild. And let's empower the communities to rebuild, and let's fund their vision. And it's been a great organizing tool. A lot of these communities have seen hardship, and it was an opportunity for them to come together and talk about a more positive enterprise. What's the future of the community? How do they rebuild it? How do they do it together? They've come up with very creative plans, and we're going to be funding their plans and their visions, and that's going to be done in the coming months. But there's a great positive energy already that's developed. So when you put both approaches together, the federal, state, county efforts and the bottom-up effort, you feel the energy has changed. And the energy went from an energy of despair and hopelessness to more of a positive energy where people see there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And they see there are people who care, and there's a way to actually improve the community at the end of the day. We use the theme, Build Back Better, because my point to these communities, it's not about repairing what was. It's about using this as an opportunity to improve and build the community back better than it was before in terms of resiliency, in terms of storm preparation, but also rebuild it better. A lot of these homes were old, a lot of the roads were old. Use this as an opportunity to actually improve the community. So at the end of the day, the silver lining on the storm was these communities will actually be the better for it. They will have gone through a truly extraordinarily difficult time, but at the end of the day, the communities are better for it. I am still learning from what we went through. It's traumatic in some ways, what we went through. The frequency that we're going through it is extraordinary, but I'm still processing it. I had experience in this field when I was in the federal government. I ran a department called Housing and Urban Development that also was involved in the federal disaster response. And at that time, over those 8 years, we were in the Midwest floods. We did the Northridge earthquake in California. We worked internationally, Honduras, Dominican Republic, Haiti, during disasters. But for me, this was different. I tell you, Hurricane Sandy, that evening, I was standing at the opening to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel and saw the water just filling that tunnel. The Hudson River had come over the sides from the west. Lower end of Manhattan was underwater. And we're watching it fill the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel and saying to each other, you know, when does this end? How does it end? And it was only when Mother Nature decided that it was over, that it was over. And the powerlessness in the face of Mother Nature and this onslaught of water. That night, we went to the 9/11 site, the Ground Zero site. No lights, because the electricity was out in Lower Manhattan. The site was filling up so fast in the foundation, in the basement area, that the engineer thought that maybe the retaining wall had breached. So the water wasn't coming from the top, the water was coming from the bottom. The retaining wall of the Ground Zero site is the retaining wall for the Hudson River. It was of that proportion, you know, where you were looking at a catastrophe and utterly powerless in the face of it during Irene and Lee. We're in the middle of the Catskills and just felt how fast things can go very, very bad, very, very quickly. And it's like a series of dominoes. Roads clogged with water, just out of the blue, flash floods, just in a matter of minutes. The roads are closed, no cell phone signal, radio doesn't work, and that's it. You're out of communication, and you're stuck, and all the preparation and all the equipment, you know, you're powerless. So those lessons, those experiences that we all went through are something that we have to learn from. And as I mentioned before, the frequency in and of itself is something. I don't want to get into a discussion of global warming, what's the cause of the weather changes. That's a totally different topic for a different day. I don't care what the causes are. The effect is inarguable. And the effect is extreme weather that we haven't experienced before. And those extreme weather patterns are the problem. And they're going to become more and more of the problem as time goes on, all the scientists say. So it's the frequency of the disasters, and it's the scale of the disaster that makes it a totally different issue. When you affect the Catskills and central New York and the North Country all at the same time, and that is the area of response, the scale is so large as to create a problem in and of itself. These tended in the past to be more localized situations. And it was the locality that addressed it with assistance from the neighboring localities, with assistance from the state, but it was a local situation. We now have these massive regional situations. Hurricane Sandy, New York City, and Long Island. Where do you begin to address an area that large with that many people, millions and millions of people? Downstate, you tend to have it in density of population. Upstate, you have it in scale of geographic area. How do you cover hundreds and hundreds of square miles? Where does the National Guard start? Where does the state police start? How do you start the interface with all those different localities and all those different county governments? So it's a situation, frankly, when you look at the frequency and the scale, that we haven't seen before. Now, we're going to learn from it, and we're going to learn quickly, and we have already. We're starting 2 institutes to learn from it. One's called New York Rise. New York Rise is basically resiliency training for communities and local governments. How do you build your community back in a way that is more resilient? And that's NYU Stony Brook, Brookhaven Laboratories is helping us with that kind of technology. New technology in building homes, new technology in building water sewage treatment plants, not glamorous, but very important. New technology in building roads and culverts, et cetera, to hold additional capacity. That's one institute. And one which you're going to start today is the New York State Emergency Management Certification and Training Institute, and that's LIU and SUNY and Syracuse University. Training to make sure each individual has the best personal skill set that we can muster, and that we understand the operating protocols among the different operations and the different units. This gets very complicated very quickly, as you know, when you have as many units, as many subdivisions as we have, and we're trying to interface in an intelligent way, put on top of it the not-for-profit organizations, voluntary organizations. So understanding those operating protocols is very important before anything happens once again. And in spirit of context, you read newspapers, stories about state government and what we do here in Albany. And a lot of times you can read those stories and you say, well, that's a lot of nonsense that they have going on there. But at the end of the day, what we do matters. And there are basic functions that make a difference in this state. One of them is schools either educate our children or we fail our children. We either get taxes under control or businesses are going to leave this state. We either police effectively or criminals are on the street instead of in jail. And government either works in an emergency or people die. Period. Period. And the people in this room know that better than anyone else. This is probably the highest stakes, is the occupation that we're talking about today. When it works, you save lives and you save property. God forbid we get to a situation where it doesn't work well. People will lose their lives. So this is serious, serious business. And we're learning as we go, and we're at a place where no one has been before. No one can tell you what the weather patterns will be. Nobody can tell you when the next storm will be. I go to sleep every night fearing that alarm that goes off, fearing that alert, that it's another storm, another flood. We don't know. But I do know several things. I know, number one, that we have the best first responders in the country, in this state. And I know that they care deeply about what they do, and I know they are tremendously talented. I know that we have a citizenry in this state that is second to none. You know, we're New Yorkers. They like to talk about how tough we are. We're tough. Yeah, we can be tough. But we can also be loving and giving and community-oriented people. I saw New Yorkers give one to the other in a way that was extraordinary. I remember after Irene and Lee down in the Catskills, I was in a basement of a home, and we were shoveling out a woman's home, and another woman was helping, and it was hot, and it was ugly, and we're shoveling out that mud, which really isn't mud, it's more like a sludge. I don't even know what it is. And we're filling it in buckets, and we're handing the buckets up, and we've been doing this for a while, and we finished the basement, and I've been chatting with this woman, and she said she lived down the block. And I said, well, show me your house when we leave this basement. We leave the basement, we walk down the block. She walks me into her house. Her house was just as bad as the house that we had finished shoveling out the basement. And she had to do everything we just did for her own house. And she left her house to help her neighbor, knowing that she was in the exact same situation. And I said to her, wow, you have a problem here too? She said, yes, but I wanted to help my neighbor, literally. And I said to myself, what a beautiful instinct. What a really beautiful instinct. We all strive for that, but we're going to put someone else ahead of ourselves. That's who we are. They talk about different regions. Well, we're upstate, we're downstate. We're one state. When someone needs help, we're one state. We're like a family. Yeah, we can squabble, we can do what we do. But someone needs something, we're there. In the midst, after Irene and Lee, we organized something called Labor for Your Neighbor. It was organized just before Labor Day. And we put it together on a couple of days' notice. And we put a call out for people to volunteer and come help the communities that were hurt by Irene and Lee. And they said, don't do it because you're a few days before Labor Day, there's no notice, and nobody wants to come on Labor Day to shovel mud in someone else's home. We said, we'll try it. We put it out on the web. Thousands and thousands of New Yorkers showed up to help communities that they had no relation to, except they were New Yorkers. Yeah, tough. Loving, community-oriented, and giving. And I know this. We don't know what lies ahead, but we are going to educate ourselves, and we are going to organize, and we are going to have the best trained emergency response in the United States of America, because that's what New York does. New York leads, and New York figures it out first, and New York rises to the occasion, and that's what this conference is all about. I see this as a great opportunity for this state to lead once again, and organizing and training and mobilizing the best emergency force in this nation. And as we figure out what it is, and we watch the situation evolve, we'll know we're in the state that's prepared. Thank you for being here, and God bless.
Thank you, Governor. While communities statewide experienced such hardship and devastation as a result of the extreme weather over the past 2.5 years, the storm has also brought out, as the Governor just mentioned, the best of New Yorkers. The South Shore of Long Island during Superstorm Sandy, to the flooded streets of Margaretville during Irene, to the towns of Jay and Keene, up in the Adirondacks, and every corner of the state, the spirit of community and neighbor helping neighbor was on full display during these last few years. Today we want to honor a few New Yorkers who truly went above and beyond the call of duty during these storms, displaying heroism, courage, and an unwavering commitment to the welfare of others. For each of these awardees, after I read their names, I'd like to ask you to come forward, receive a token of our thanks and gratitude for your service. And I also, to the audience, just like to say, this is a very, very tough part of this program. There are just a small number of people getting awards that really represent thousands of first responders across the state who did outstanding work. This is like an all-star team, because in no way does it diminish the work that was done across the state during these storms. To have these folks honored just shows that they went above and beyond, but everybody else in this community and across the state did as well during these storms. So this is a very, very special moment of the program. I'm going to ask the Governor to step up, who will make the awards. Our first awardee is Andrea Curran, who's a manager of Camp Bulldog. I'm going to have Andrea please come up. She's coming up. I want her to look at her as I read this. Andrea is a retired school teacher from Lindenhurst on Long Island. She's been on the front lines of storm recovery ever since Sandy hit the South Shore of Long Island. After the storm, Andrea began volunteering for Camp Bulldog, a disaster relief site that provided a series of services to the community, including medical care, legal services, mental health support, as well as food and supplies. Camp Bulldog was a hub of support for Sandy victims in the Lindenhurst area, serving as a central gathering place for not just vital supplies and services, but for residents to support each other. And Andrea was at the heart of these efforts. Even after the camp closed, Andrea continued to dedicate herself to relief efforts, organizing a support group for neighbors to continue to support each other. Her tireless dedication has helped countless New Yorkers. Please join me again in thanking Andrea for her great work. Don't leave the stage too quickly. Next, we want to honor 3 members of our great New York National Guard. First, Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Zeggers, Command Sergeant Major Thomas Ciampola, and First Sergeant Kevin Conklin.
backwards up from those areas.
Also want to have General Murphy join us up on stage. And as we give these, before I read the overview, any elected officials from the region who would like to join us, please come up on stage. First, Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Zegers, Command Sergeant Major Thomas Ciampola, First Sergeant Kevin Conklin. New York's National Guard were in the middle of the state's response to each of these storms. Today, we are honoring 3 Guardsmen from the 102nd Military Police Battalion on behalf of all the National Guard. When Sandy hit on October 29th, the 102nd Military Police Battalion deployed to communities in the hardest-hit Long Island communities where their actions saved many lives. One team, working with the Nassau County Police and the Long Beach firefighters, rescued more than 35 people from houses and stranded vehicles as the waters rose from that storm surge. Another team, working with the Island Park Fire Department, helped rescue 20 people from rising waters. At the same time, other members of the battalion were deploying with trucks and Humvees to provide food and water to those in need and conducting dozens of response missions just hours after the storm hit. In the following days, the soldiers delivered emergency meals, bottled water, and blankets to Long Islanders who lost so much during the storm. This is only one example of the tireless dedication and courage of the National Guard during the storms, and we are proud to honor them today. Next, we'd like to honor 4 members of the FDNY. Deputy Assistant Chief James Daly, the FDNY Strategic Planning Chief. Deputy Assistant Chief Kevin Butler. Firefighter Andrew Hagan. Firefighter Leonard Simondano. Please come forward. Again, each time any electeds that want to join us can. The members of the FDNY we are honoring today need no introduction. While the city was in its most difficult days, the FDNY was at its best. During Superstorm Sandy, they were the true heroes of New York, working around the clock, performing countless rescues and rushing to emergencies across the city. We all remember the devastating Breezy Point fire that destroyed so many homes. It was our bravest who were there fighting the flames and risking their lives to bring New Yorkers to safety during that time. And while they performed these heroic acts, many were dealing with serious damage in their own homes. The FDNY is represented today by, again, Deputy Assistant Chief James Daly, Deputy Assistant Chief Kevin Butler, Firefighter Andrew Hagan, and Firefighter Leonard Simondano. We want to honor them and all of their colleagues today, and please give them a great round of applause. Thank you. Next, we'd like to honor 2 members of the NYPD. Al Pisano, Captain of NYPD, and James Wallig, Captain of NYPD. Please welcome both Captain Pisano and Captain Wallig. The members of the NYPD we are honoring today represent the entire force of New York's finest. During Superstorm Sandy, as coastal waters flooded neighborhoods across the city, and millions of residents were without power, the NYPD went above and beyond a call of duty, helping rescue New Yorkers from danger, evacuate flooded hospitals, and putting their own lives on the line for the safety of others. These heroes were at their best during the worst of the storm, and we cannot thank them enough for their courage and their dedication. Please join me in honoring Captain Al Pisano and Captain James Wallig today, and also on behalf of these 2 gentlemen, the entire NYPD force. Thank you both. Our next honoree is Joe Steyer, Deputy Sheriff of Ulster County. Deputy Sheriff Steyer's courageous actions during Irene and Lee helped bring residents in flooded communities to safety. When the flooding began, Deputy Sheriff Steyer was on the front line going from home to rescue those who were trapped by the rising floodwaters, as well as navigating flooded highways to help stranded motorists out of their vehicles. Deputy Sheriff Steyer put the safety of his fellow New Yorkers before all else, demonstrating the selfless sacrifice of our first responders that saved so many during these storms. Please join me in honoring Deputy Sheriff Steyer. Our next awardee is Sarah Goodrich, who is the Executive Director of the Schoharie Area Long-Term Recovery, Co-Chair of the Schoharie County New York Rising Committee. Sarah? Sarah Goodrich has been in the middle of flood response, relief, and recovery efforts since the day Hurricane Irene hit Schoharie County. Immediately after the flooding from Irene in August of 2011, Sarah took on the task of organizing volunteers in Schoharie, including helping organize the hundreds who turned to help residents clean the debris out of their homes. While Sarah and her husband, Dave's house was not damaged, out of the kindness of their hearts, they invited two families that were affected by the flooding to stay at their home. They ended up being there for nearly 6 months. In January of 2012, the Cobblestone Times-Journal named Sarah its Star of the Year for her efforts in leading the flood recovery efforts. Sarah also serves as co-chair of Schoharie County's New York Rising Committee, helping guide the long-term rebuilding process. Please join me in honoring Sarah today. Sarah? Our next awardee is Trooper John Keogh of the New York State Police. Also welcome the Superintendent to join us as well. Trooper Keogh demonstrated true heroism during Hurricane Irene. When a call came in that an individual was trapped by flood waters in his vehicle and had climbed through a window and onto the roof of the car and was surrounded by swift-moving waters, Trooper Keogh responded to that call. Upon arriving at the scene, he employed the help of a tractor-trailer driver to help drive him close enough to the stranded motorist, where Trooper Keogh threw him a rope and pulled him through the water to the truck into safety. Trooper Keogh then drove the motorist out of the flooded highway as the car submerged, bringing him to a local ambulance squad. When the roadway reopened, the car was still on the scene. It had been clearly underwater for more than 12 feet of water, as evident by the high water line on nearby houses. We are happy to have Trooper Keogh's family here as well, his wife Rebecca and daughters Cassie and Isabel. If they would please stand and be recognized. And to Rebecca and also to Cassie and Isabella, your husband and your father is a true hero. We're very proud of him today. And please join me again honoring Trooper Keogh. Trooper. Our next awardee is Brett Chellis, Director, Fire Coordinator for Broome County, Office of Emergency Services. Brett? Brett knows all about responding to emergency situations, as he was at the center of Broome County's response to the 2006 flooding and again in 2011 when Tropical Storm Lee hit the area. As a result of Brett's dedication, the emergency response coordination of Broome County is highly organized and efficient, with all agencies operating out of one center. Brett developed a network of emergency responders and emergency resources that enabled the local response to engage almost immediately when disaster struck during Tropical Storm Lee. His efforts and hard work undoubtedly saved lives and helped residents receive the services they needed to receive those services as quickly as possible. Please join me in honoring Brett. Brett? And also, our next awardee is Bob Vanderwalker, Herkimer County EMS Coordinator. The flooding in the Mohawk Valley this past summer was terrible, but the extraordinary courage and dedication of individuals such as Bob Vanderwalker helped communities in Herkimer recover from this disaster. After the flooding across communities in upstate New York this past summer, Bob worked day and night to coordinate response efforts in Herkimer County, ensuring that residents had access to food, shelter, and cleanup resources. He worked to move resources to the hardest hit areas, keeping in close contact with local officials to see what was needed and making sure it got there. When word came in that a second round of storms was coming through the area, Bob was on the ground with the first responders, making sure the county was doing all it could to keep residents safe. Please join me in honoring Bob. Bob, congratulations. Our final awardee this morning is Ron Konowitz, who is a volunteer coordinator, Town of Keene, Hurricane Irene Recovery Team, and Keene Volunteer Firefighter. Ron Conowitz, a volunteer firefighter and retired teacher from Keene, went above and beyond his normal duties to help the residents of Keene after the devastation caused by Hurricane Irene. In addition to working around the clock during the storm to help New Yorkers, after the storm, Ron spent months organizing cleanup efforts and coordinating volunteer teams in the town of Keene. He's been a central part of the town's relief and cleanup efforts, and the town of Keene truly looks like a new place today, thanks in part to the hard work of Ron and his teams of volunteers. And also thanks in part to the hard work of Ron and teams of volunteers that he organized. We are proud to say that Ron and his fellow firefighters also have a new rebuilt firehouse after the old Keene firehouse was destroyed by the flooding. Please join me in honoring Ron Conowitz. Ron. I'd like to ask everybody to show our appreciation for these brave men and women who we just honored today. We owe you all a huge debt of gratitude. I want to just close this morning's program by thanking you all for joining us today to honor New York's bravest first responders and really honoring all of you for your great work. We're proud of what you have done. We're proud of what this administration has done during these storms. And clearly, as the governor said, New York is really at the forefront across this country for emergency response and planning. Really thanks to the governor and thanks to all of you today. And again, I want to thank all the awardees and their families for your great service, your great commitment, your courage, your heroism, and all of you for what you've done. We can't say thank you enough for what you've done across the state. You are phenomenal public servants, and this state and all of us are very proud to have you. That concludes our morning program. We're going to close for lunch. I don't have the exact room, but I know that first responders will always find food. So they're going to know when you go out this room, you're going to somehow you'll find out where it is. It's one of the rooms out in the convention center. The governor's serving lunch today. You have a great program this afternoon. Again, on behalf of all of us, thank you for being here today, for being part of this. May God bless you, and please stay safe. Thank you.